Captain Marvel is the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe film to come out. This is coming out 1 month before Endgame, of course, and this film's purpose is to basically set up Captain Marvel right before we see that film. Captain Marvel takes place in the 90s, so basically taking place right before any MCU film except for Captain America: The First Avenger. Carol Danvers finds herself working with this intergalactic space force called the Kree. Their job is to stop these aliens called the Skrulls from shape-shifting and taking over planets and exterminating the entire race, basically. After a mission gone wrong, though, she ends up on Earth. She has to find out how to get off this planet back with the Kree. She runs into Samuel L. Jackson, who is working for S.H.I.E.L.D. in the very early stages of S.H.I.E.L.D., of course, and they're trying to also discover if she ever had a life previously on Earth before, because she's having amnesia problems and she can't really remember everything about her past. If you remember anything about my history with the MCU, I've pretty much liked almost all of them. Iron Man 2 is really the only one that I've really disliked, and even then I gave that a C+. I haven't seen that movie in a couple years though, same with The Incredible Hulk and Thor: The Dark World, so maybe I do need to give those films some rewatches at some point. Maybe there are other films I need to rewatch in this series too. But nonetheless, I ranged from liking to loving all of these Marvel films, and Captain Marvel, of course, I was looking forward to because it's a new character that I get to learn about in this universe. It's setting up an important character that's going to take place in Endgame, and I'm pumped to see what they set up for Endgame. But I gotta be honest, walking into this movie, the trailers didn't really wow me per se. There are definitely some parts of the trailers where I was like, okay, that could be really cool, but going into it, I had a really big fear that this movie might just be rushed for the sake of getting it out there right before Endgame and not really feeling like a complete film, just kind of like this filler stepping stone. So obviously going into this film, I was interested to see what they could do with this character, but I was still a little skeptical going in as well, and I walked out having a decent time with this movie, even though I do think it is a very heavily flawed film. I actually did end up walking out of it thinking, it was fun. What helps this movie with its entertainment is definitely Brie Larson as Carol Danvers. I thought her personality was very good. Her performance was really good. It actually did fit this character that they were setting up. It let you in on what kind of person Carol Danvers is before she gets these powers, and also even when she does have these powers, how it incorporates into that. And I thought her performance was really good. We'll talk a little bit more about the character later, but I think the performance by Brie was very good. She was definitely very dedicated to this. I also loved her interactions with Samuel L. Jackson. They have a really good chemistry with each other. This movie, a lot of it is basically a buddy kind of movie. I wouldn't say buddy cop, but like a buddy movie with these two, and they were really good together. Samuel L. Jackson, of course, killing it as always, but another thing I'd say they killed it at was the de-aging effects on him, and I was shocked, because going into this film, that was another thing I was skeptical about. I didn't know how the de-aging was going to look on him, and also Clark Gregg as Coulson reprising his role. And at first, I was like, okay, that's a little iffy, like I can tell that's some de-aging, but as the film kind of went on, I was like, honestly, I don't even notice it anymore. It just kind of looks very natural, and it looks like it fits in with everything else. And it's quite extraordinary that they were able to do that. Like, oh my god, the fact that they can de-age Samuel L. Jackson this well, you know, it just shows how much our technology is improving. And it's kind of scary, but it's also really cool. There are also some other visual effects stuff that doesn't really look up to par, but for the most part, the visual effects are actually a standout for me. They're very vibrant, you know, very colorful, very well thought out with all these alien structures that you see, and it's just, of course, as per usual with these Marvel superhero films, the visuals are very good, though there are a couple spots where you can tell they just don't hold up with some of the other stuff, but for the most part, it looks very good. Another pair I liked whenever Carol Danvers is interacting with Maria, her friend from the Air Force. Those two actually do have some good chemistry with each other. Also, they let you in on the fact that they are friends, and their scenes together actually offer a little bit of touching moments for me, honestly. Like, there are a couple parts where I was like, oh, that's a good moment, you know, for these two characters that clearly have a strong bond. And I'd say those scenes with them actually do give this movie a little bit more heart, and that's a good thing. I'd say the performance that surprised me the most in this film was Ben Mendelsohn as the character Talos, who is like the head Skrull of these Skrulls, and he was really good. Like, I'm used to Ben Mendelsohn playing like the Rogue One, Ready Player One, and Robin Hood villains, and those villain roles have just kind of gotten worse and worse. I was really worried going in because I thought it was going to be just another generic villain role, but he was actually kind of a scene stealer. Like, he had some really funny Ben Mendelsohn kind of like sarcastic lines. I loved him. I thought he was fantastic. He's a character that I'm not sure if we'll ever see his character again, but he's one I'd love to see in some other way. Like, he's so good here, and he's one of the most entertaining parts of the movie. And the jokes also are pretty solid, you know? It's a typical Marvel sense of humor that we've seen before. It's not like their funniest film or anything, but I still think their jokes work. Goose the cat is a standout also with Ben Mendelsohn. This cat, at first I was like, okay, what are you gonna do with this cat? Like, just, like, what are you gonna do with him humor-wise? And wow. I was surprised with what they did with this cat to make him funny, but they nailed it. I also thought the action sequences were really well done, very solid stuff from these two directors, Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden. They did a solid job directing it. And the score done by Pinar Toprak, I think that's how you pronounce it, sorry if I mispronounced it, that score was also very good. Like, it kind of surprised me how much I actually do remember some of the musical beats from the score, so that's very good. Very electronic-y, kind of synth-like, and I thought that really worked well for this film style. So I really enjoyed the music, I enjoyed the visual effects, the action sequences were solidly done, the characters for the most part I thought were really good too, on Earth at least. So what were my big issues with this movie? Well, I guess you could say a lot of my issues really do trace back to the opening 20 or so minutes of this film. It doesn't really set up the rest of this film's plot very well. In fact, it kind of butchers a lot of this film's story. The film opens up on this planet that is inhabited by the Kree people. She's fighting Jude Law for like a practice session, and they're kind of immediately kind of rushing through these certain things that are supposed to probably be delved into a little bit more so you could build the world up, that the world of this planet that they're on, to build up how Brie Larson is living right now, to kind of contrast how she does later on Earth, and they don't really do it all that well. I thought the first 20 minutes or so felt really choppy, and at first I was like, oh my, is this movie gonna be bad? Because the way they opened it, it didn't have a really good flow, and I wasn't really getting into any of the stuff they were building up with the Kree, or even Jude Law's character, and I hate to say it, even though these two had some good banter when they were fighting initially, as the film progressed, Jude Law's character just got bland, and then just really dumb for me, honestly. Like, this character just feels so cookie cutter and bland to me, but in the movie's world, he's supposed to mean a lot to Carol Danvers, but because, like I said earlier, they didn't build it up well enough in the opening of the film, it just fell apart real quickly. A lot of stuff that you could have gotten out of the amnesia story that Carol Danvers has, the emotional effects you could have had, kind of do fall flat in a lot of areas, except for maybe her conversations with Maria later on. But certain things about how she got her powers, certain things about how the plot unfolds, it just didn't really affect me all that much. I will say though, there is a certain twist that they take, mainly because I was going into this film knowing that the Skrulls were in this, and I thought, okay, they're gonna play a lot on the paranoia of we don't know who a Skrull is, and they're gonna, like, maybe change up the MCU because maybe someone we know is a Skrull or something like that, but they actually play it pretty tame on the Skrull part, the Skrull paranoia part, for a good reason, of course, and I was actually kind of surprised with how they took that, and I actually ended up liking that bit, but that's really the only thing that really kind of surprised me in this film and kind of affected me a little bit, but that doesn't really concern Brie Larson's character all that much. Captain Marvel, her arc in this film is just really too simple, and like I said, if they had built it up well enough in the beginning, it could have been something really effectful, kind of meaningful, but instead, it just kind of feels like a, oh yeah, this is a Phase 1 Paramount kind of arc. You know what I mean, right? The early Phase 1 movies. This movie definitely feels like it was made for that time, but it somehow got held back to now. And like I said, I really enjoyed Brie Larson's performance because I really liked her attitude and her personality, but her character is just really lacking. And once you do find out what the film's overall message is, as far as what the character's arc is supposed to be, what she's supposed to learn, it's just kind of like a, really? Like, after like over 20 MCU films with so many characters, this is the arc that you want to go with this character that's supposed to be like this big important part of Endgame? The most powerful MCU character, like this is the thing that you want to give them as far as a message? Okay, like it wasn't awful or anything, but like I said, this movie does feel very average as far as the other MCU films have been before. And we've seen MCU films go great lengths to differentiate themselves from each other. And this film just kind of feels like it's about what you'd expect. Also, I'm not going to spoil it, but they explain how a character that we know got something, and the explanation for it left me audibly saying in the theater, you've gotta be kidding me. Like, the guy next to me probably heard me, but I don't care. It was such a ridiculous moment that when you see it, it's like, okay, I get what they're doing. It's like a comedic effect kind of thing, but it really does kind of undercut a lot of what this character kind of stands for, and you'll see what I mean when you see the film, but I just walked out really mad at this one small thing. So as much as I did have fun with this film, it is an entertaining Marvel film, of course. The two post-credit scenes, of course, got me pumped for Endgame, and then also just made me laugh because they were great post-credit scenes. But overall, what I'm trying to get at is that even though this is a fun, decent movie. It's one of those decent, fun movies that I can't really see myself ever watching again. Like, I'm sure if I had to watch it again, I'd be like, okay, sure, that was a decent film, but it's not one that I'm desperately trying to watch over again because the story just falls flat in so many ways. And as much as I did say that Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck did a solid job directing when it comes to those action sequences I mentioned earlier, the rest of the film just doesn't really have a lot of that great directorial flair that we've seen before in other MCU films, like the Russos, or a James Gunn, or a Taika Waititi, or these other directors that we've seen them have like this great style in the MCU. And then with this film, it's just kind of like anybody could have made it. So as much as I did appreciate them for making fun action sequences, I do think that a lot of this film's kind of averageness kind of stems to how they approached the directing, how they kind of approached working with the script that they had. And if they ever are to come back for another Captain Marvel film, if they do make another one, I think it's very important that we need to understand where our characters are at in the beginning of the film instead of just rushing to the Earth stuff so you can get the plot going, basically, because really not focusing on Brie Larson's life on the Kree-inhabited planet really hurt a lot of the emotional stuff you could have done with the rest of the film. I'm gonna give Captain Marvel a B-. I know that overall I've talked a lot about how the story is kind of very average and there's only one thing that kind of surprised me that worked, but overall I did have fun with it. The action sequences were fun, visual effects were good, the de-aging is like really great, and the acting of course is great from Samuel L. Jackson and Brie Larson and Ben Mendelsohn, who really killed it, but there's a lot of things that really kind of hurt this movie, like Jude Law and his story and the Kree people. And this film that was supposed to be like this big important thing, the most powerful MCU character is finally getting her story told, and it's so important right before we see Endgame, it just left me kind of a little underwhelmed. But still, it was an entertaining film. It is one of my least favorite MCU films, though. But if you've seen Captain Marvel, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.